So, what happens when your diagnosis is just, well, a label? A word that's supposed to explain everything but actually explains nothing. Today, we're going to follow a personal journey through years of chronic pain that led to a completely unexpected answer. And if you've ever felt dismissed by a medical term, I think this story is really going to hit home. This quote from Kyle, who's at the very heart of our story today, it just cuts right to the bone, doesn't it? This isn't just about some physical ache. It's about how a mysterious, unexplained condition can literally change the person you are. All right, so our story kicks off with a diagnosis that, on the surface, seemed to fit, but it offered zero relief. This created this huge, frustrating gap between the official medical label and the day-to-day reality of living with just awful pain. For years, the official story was costochondritis. Simple enough, right? But that word did absolutely nothing to touch the constant, burning pain that started in his ribs and shot straight through to his back. It was just a label, not an answer. And you know what? It was wrecking his life. And you can totally see why doctors landed on costochondritis at first. I mean, inflammation of the rib cartilage, the symptoms seemed to line up perfectly. But this very plausible theory ended up sending the whole investigation down a really long and ultimately fruitless path. And the impact was just profound. We're talking about losing work, not being able to find a single moment of calm, and feeling your entire personality shift. That feeling of being a sick, aggressive dog, that wasn't just a bad mood. It was a direct result of his body being in a constant state of emergency. And that brings us to the next phase of the story. Years spent chasing down solutions that were honestly never going to work. Why? Because they were all based on a flawed premise. It was like being stuck in a medical maze with no exit in sight. Just look at this timeline. It really paints a picture of the frustration, doesn't it? Year after year, trying different things, injections that did nothing, even surgery for a completely unrelated issue, all in this desperate search for the source. And then, when all of that failed, the explanation started to shift from the physical to the psychological. Well, maybe it's just anxiety. The sheer variety of treatments that didn't work is so telling. You've got standard imaging, like ultrasounds and x-rays coming back clean, nothing's wrong. Corticosteroid injections, no effect. They even treated an unrelated issue in his shoulder, hoping it was connected. But that core pain, it remained completely untouched. Now here's a really crucial secondary effect. The body, in its attempt to protect the source of the pain, started to compensate. His shoulders were unconsciously lifted all the time. This created this whole cascade of new problems, massive muscle tightness and pain all through his neck and upper back. The body was basically fighting a ghost, and it was hurting itself in the process. But then, after all those years, after all those dead ends, one single test finally broke the case wide open. This was the turning point. This was the moment that changed the entire direction of the investigation. So you really have to wonder, right? After x-rays and ultrasounds came back totally clean, what could possibly be left to see? What could some different kind of image show that everything else had just completely missed? The answer was a radioactive bone scan. It uses this special tracer that gathers in areas of high bone activity, think inflammation or repair. So it doesn't just see the structure like an x-ray does. It sees metabolic activity. It literally sees what the body's doing. And this, right here, just brilliantly illustrates the difference. On one side, you have the results from years of standard tests. Nothing, a big blank. And on the other, the bone scan result, a clear, undeniable hotspot of increased activity right at the manubriosternal junction. That's where the two main bones of the sternum meet. So, here's the kicker. It wasn't costochondritis at all. It was manubriosternal junction friction. The two main bones of the breastbone were literally grinding against each other, and that friction was the real source of the irritation, the inflammation, and all those years of debilitating pain. So finally, the code was cracked. But knowing the problem is one thing, actually fixing it is another beast entirely, and the solution proved to be just as unconventional as the diagnosis itself. Now that they had the correct target, they tried corticosteroid injections again, this time putting them directly into that specific junction. And they helped, for sure, but they weren't a magic bullet. Real, lasting progress was going to require a combination of different strategies all working together. And here is that three-part strategy. First, those targeted injections to calm down the immediate inflammation. Second, and this is a really cool modern twist, using an AI to design a workout plan. It could basically figure out exercises that would strengthen the body without putting stress on that specific joint. And third, taking painkillers consistently, not just for the pain itself, but to help break that cycle of muscle tension. And just think about the impact of the painkillers alone. They accounted for a solid 20% reduction in pain. And that's because they finally allowed all those compensating muscles in the neck and back to relax, breaking a feedback loop of tightness and pain that had been going on for years. This is the kind of practical, real-world knowledge that came from that AI-assisted plan and just good old trial and error. Certain movements, like an overhead press or a bench press, were absolute poison for the joint. But others, like chest flies and specific types of shoulder raises, were totally fine. So it wasn't about stopping exercise, it was about being incredibly smart and strategic about it. So what does this whole journey mean for you? Well, you can think of it as a roadmap, a guide for anyone out there who feels stuck in their own diagnostic mystery. It's about reframing you as the lead detective in your own case. Okay, so here's the action plan, the key takeaways. First, you have to advocate for yourself. Push for more advanced imaging, like a bone scan, if the standard tests are showing nothing. Second, embrace strategic movement. The right kind of exercise is medicine. And finally, be smart about your tools. Things like foam rollers can be great, but only when they're targeting the real problem, not just the symptoms. And this is a really important, realistic update. The journey isn't totally over. A bone graft to fuse that joint might be the next step down the road. But life is immeasurably better, and the gym, more than anything else, restored a sense of agency and control over a body that had felt like an enemy for so long. And this message, this is really the emotional core of this entire story. It's such a powerful validation for anyone who's ever been told their pain is all in their head. The takeaway is so clear. You deserve a real answer, not just a dismissal. And that leaves us with one final big question for you to think about in your own health journey. Have you been given a convenient label, or have you actually found a true, actionable answer? Because really, that difference is everything.